What it is, y'all, it is your old boy Pilk. Let's have a quick discussion about episode 4 of Danmachi because there's a lot to take in from this episode. Now, it wasn't the most action-packed episode. It wasn't the most interesting episode, from, the standpoint of, an action or a comedy or whatever. It was kind of the median. That said, there's a lot to take away from this episode, and I mean a lot to take away. And we're going to get to why I chose this screen here in just a few minutes, because I did choose this from the opening for a very good reason. But when we first open up our episode here, and when we're first, introduced to the characters, there's kind of like this scene where you see them breathing fire, and they're doing all this. But you find out that they're literally just making food. And that kind of could have been presumed based on the fact that we got to pick up right where episode 3 left off. Bell and his party have met the Xenos. They've been introduced to this concept of, what they are and kind of, I don't want to say what their objectives are, because you get a lot more of that in this episode. But, we kind of knew they weren't really a threat in the traditional sense of the term. So, it was just a humorous way to start the episode. But most of this episode is really spent in the dungeon just communicating between the Xenos, mostly Lead, but the Xenos and Bell and his party. Now, obviously, not everybody's happy about this. We meet a new character, Gross, who is, a dragon type. He's clearly, and he's got a posse, so to speak, which we learn more about a little bit later, who clearly just despise the humans. They don't want anything to do with them. It's all that's kind of to be expected. I mean, you're always going to have that skepticism, I guess, for lack of a better. I mean, because think about the humans. A lot of humans are going to be skeptical of a monster that can even talk. So it's kind of a natural thing. But we start to really explore the lore and the basis of what the Xenos are. And we get, a lot here. There really, really is just a huge amount to take in, because we start to really talk about what the dungeon is. And the dungeon is almost like treated with a certain level of sentience in this situation. The dungeon in their situation is, they refer to it as the mother. Basically, it births them, and then when they die, they go back to it. Obviously, when they're killed or whatever by adventurers, then they go back to the dungeon as a whole and are more or less reincarnated. Now, that's getting into something we talk about a little bit later, but Lead and Bell are just having just kind of a genuine conversation here. And Bell asks Lead, he says, well, all that armor that you're wearing, that's kind of adventure armor, isn't it? And Lead guy's like, when you kill monsters, you take horns and teeth and stuff. Yeah, we do the same. In a roundabout way, pretty much. They get attacked, they have to defend themselves. And that's just loot. Literally, dead adventurers drop loot. Now, that's not to say they're all dead, necessarily. Because in the first episode, we were introduced to this idea of a monster that was stealing equipment. So probably, we'd scare off, adventurers that are just not in it for the fight. And then, they bolt. And getting to old boy here. Now, this is going to get into a little bit of speculation. Lead is kind of the lead of the group. Hence the name. He introduces himself as the strongest, and then he's kind of like, well, I kind of wish I could say that. There's one of the guy that showed up recently. And if you go back through the beginning, they're going through a bunch of different, obviously there's a few units that are going to show up here, a few Xenos are going to show up later on that actually will pose a bit of a threat. Makes a lot of sense. Then there's this random guy, and I'm thinking, so they talk a lot later on in the episode about when the way the Xenos basically come to be is that as they die, the complex ideas and things like that they begin to harbor may manifest in different ways, and that's why the Xenos could actually be born with different abilities, speaking, cognizant thought, things like that. Even Lead himself says he has dreams of seeing the surface and seeing the sunset and all that. That's like basically their whole driving force. They want to be brought to the surface and be able to mingle amongst humans. They really start to bring and even Vinny, whatever you want to call her. I'm going to call her Winnie just because I think it's a cuter name. And she's adorable. Don't get me wrong. She is absolutely adorable. I cannot, not in a perverse way, legitimately, she's, must protect type of thing. But neither here nor there. She even talks in previous episodes about how she has these dreams that she's ripping people apart. And so you really start to get this idea of this. Yes, the monsters literally are being reincarnated. The dungeon is being basically seen as the almost like the Hindu concept of reincarnation, where it's like, everything has a soul when it goes back in, and then it's spit back out somewhere later as something else. And as their experiences and everything start to culminate, some of them can gain cognizant ability. Some even have the ability, like Lead and Ray and Winnie and all those. They actually can basically gain the ability to use human speech patterns. So a lot of that just comes from living and dying again, which is where we get to this dude. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is 100% speculation. I have not read the light novels this far. I'm basically caught up with where we are in the anime. I will be reading ahead, but I think we've seen this guy before. And it's been a good minute, but he looks really familiar. That's just my moment of speculation. We're going to get back into the actual episode. So we learn basically a lot about what the dungeon is and, what's going on. And we're actually now formally in the series introduced to Fells at the same time. Fells is basically a mediary between Ranos and the Xenos, and she even says that's her primary task. Now, obviously, we know she does other reconnaissance. They do reconnaissance and stuff like that. But what's really kind of striking about this situation is Fells has always kind of been like a shadowy figure. Now we start to get this whole idea of who Fells is, or in this case, was. Fells is introduced as someone who used to be human. Fells, and they insinuate that Fells is a sage that at one point in time basically gained the ability to grant themselves with immortality. Now, it's not confirmed nor denied, but it is heavily alluded that is the situation. Fells also removes their cloak and reveals it's literally just a human skeleton that is alive. And Bell even mentions, he's like, are you a monster? Are you this? Or are you that? And even when the cloak is removed, it's like, no, I'm not the skeleton monsters. I'm literally just a human skeleton that still is able to walk and talk for some reason. So obviously a lot of mistakes were made in Fells' life at some point in time. But so that we basically get this idea of who Fells is in regards to the relationship with the Xenos and the Hestia Familia and all that. And obviously Fells has these magic items that it is able to communicate with Lead and the other Xenos. And there's just this great interaction. You finally, like I said, really get to meet this character and get to know who Fells is. We can go into detail all day long, but the long and the short of it is that's the primary focus of this episode. Now, we also do get a little glimpse of Hermes and what Hermes has been doing. Obviously, he had Osfi trailing the Icaros Familia, and she basically follows him down to 19 and is getting an idea, but obviously that Familia was able to sense her presence and bolted. Now, I'm imagining in the light novels there's a lot more involved here, more than just the passable situation that they've kind of discussed. So I'm really looking forward to reading more about that. I'm not quite there, but I'm getting really, really close in the novels. By the way, guys, if you haven't read the light novels, I haven't had a chance to do our deep dives. I really need to sit down at some point and make that happen, but it's a very long video and a very detailed video, and it is not something I've had the opportunity or the time really to make at this point, but I'm hoping to get those done, because if you haven't read the light novels, they go into so much greater detail than the anime ever could. In fact, it probably wouldn't even be a fun anime to watch, because there's so much more going into it. So if you get an opportunity, definitely go check out the light novels. I've been buying them up as quickly as I can, because they're just so well written, and they're an addictive read. But that's just my little plug there. So obviously Hermes is kind of trailing the Ikaros Familia. The Ikaros Familia is trailing the Hestia Familia and trying to get a hold of Winnie, and so on and so forth. That is going to lead us basically up to the climax of the episode, where the Ikaros Familia... Well, okay, before we get there, let's kind of discuss the relationship of Winnie and Belle at this point, because obviously, it's discussed that this is where she belongs, and it's gut-wrenching to watch it happen, but obviously, they're going into the dungeon. They're not leaving with Winnie. She's going to have to stay there with them. There is really no question about it. It's not a fun scene to watch, but at the same rate, it's a logical situation. Obviously, she goes to run up to Belle as everybody's parting ways, and Lee literally picks her up and is just like, you can't go with them. Like, if you go with them, you're going to cause them more turmoil than assistance. You got to come with us. We don't have a choice. And if that's bad enough, they do talk a little bit about the area of the dungeon where they're at basically is this free zone. And they say that there's several of these that just are unexplored areas, places that even the adventurers don't know about it, that they've never discovered, where monsters aren't spawned. Because obviously if monsters are spawned, the Xenos are seen by monsters as a threat, and the monsters will attack them. So they say that in these levels, there are certain areas that are completely safe. Monsters don't spawn there. Lily even asks, she's like, don't monsters spawn here? Don't they attack you? Well, apparently, no, they don't. And the Xenos are aware of a few of these. I'm sure, and Uranus and Fells even help them locate all these. And they even mentioned at one point in time, they're like, we have to basically nomadically travel between them, because A, we don't want to get caught, B, we don't want food to run out. And, all of that would be a bad situation. Of course, Winnie's just belly aching because she misses Makoto's cooking. Really funny situation at the beginning of this episode too, where Belle is basically made to eat a piece of the fruit from the dungeon, just like Winnie was pretty much made to eat the human food when she came up there. It's a humorous exchange. But I digress. The reality is they're like, okay, cool, we've got to move again. We're up, we're moving. The Hestia Familia found it out, and they never out and out say it, but it's kind of like the Hestia Familia found us. We've got to go do something. And so there's a small group of them that are with Winnie, and they're clearly moving, and they talk with Gross, and Gross is way far ahead. They didn't even talk to Lee. They straight up talk to Gross. And Gross is way far in advance. And then Winnie happens to pick up the sounds of this painful wailing. And, it sucks. It's a crap situation. But there's like 5 of them. And they've got to know. Like, if Gross is even like, hang tight, don't go anywhere, don't stop, I'm going to be right there. We're bringing more people. And they're like, no, we've got to go find out what this voice is. And you already know this is not going to end well. You just know it as soon as this happens. The Xenos burst in. They find Ray sprawled out. I mean, like, basically crucified on this stalagmite. And while that's going down, they discover her, and then the Ikaros Familia comes out. Dix comes out, and then everybody just kind of comes out of nowhere. There's even an attack. One of the Xenos like go to attack him, is cleaved in two and just killed in front of everybody. And if I can't criticize the episode here, and this is a minor criticism, I felt like that death should have had more weight behind it. Because while, yes, obviously that unit, it's one of the Phantasmas, that unit is going to be reincarnated, still it's a death, and that should have more gravity, more weight. I just felt like there wasn't enough push after spending an entire 2 episodes, episode and a half, humanizing the Xenos. Now this just kind of dies. I felt like there should have been more gravity behind that, but that's just a little personal side note on that one. The Eagles Familia has them surrounded. Things aren't going down well. Ray is just messed up, and then Dix is just like, it's time for the hunt. And then, boom, the episode ends. So, you already know next episode is going to be off the damn chain. Next episode is going to be nuts. It seems like it's going to be action almost straight out of the gate. I'm absolutely adoring season 3. I know it's kind of felt rushed at times, and you got to check your expectations because they can't fit everything for the light novels in the anime. It just would be way too long. I felt like the last 2 episodes were way better than the first 2, because the first 2 did feel extremely rushed. Especially the first episode itself, especially. But there are key factors that they missed and things that they've changed. But largely, these last 2 episodes felt great. So hopefully we'll be able to keep up with that moving forward. Hope the action, because one of the big criticisms that I had with season 2 is all the action felt like, okay, it came on and then it's done. Like one episode, there's this huge battle and everything's resolved. And it should go on a little bit longer. So hopefully they're able to pace these fights and build more suspense. Because once again, I think like the death of that unit, and that's the worst part. I can't even remember his name. That's how passable the whole situation was. Felt like the death of that unit should have had more impact and felt physically worse than it actually. I'm sure in the light novels it's gut-wrenching, but it should have felt way worse than it did. But that's my 2 cents on the matter. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section down below. Are you guys still hyped for episode 5, or do you kind of feel like this has been a disappointment? Me personally, I'm really enjoying season 3. I was a little disappointed in episode 1. Episode 2 started to bring it back, but 3 and 4 have been absolutely fantastic. I think 5 is going to be, if they don't try to rush it, 5 is going to be absolutely spectacular. Let me know what you guys think, and if you're hyped for episode 5, just put EP5 hype, hashtag EP5 hype in the comments section so we can get that going. For now, guys, that is going to be the video. Let me know how you guys feel in the comments section. Like if you enjoyed this review, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be back at you guys with more Danmachi here. We're going to do episode reviews every Friday, or at least in some close proximity to the episode release if I can. And then, of course, we've got Memoria Freeze content, live streams 4 days a week, just on Memoria Freeze. So stay tuned for all that. I'll be back at you guys soon.